I'm a 33-year-old woman from Los Angeles. 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I hit 30 and finally did what we'd been planning for 5. We sold nearly everything we owned, including my car, packed up his Trailblazer, and started roaming the US. In Canada, backpackers is close enough. We chase good weather and disappear into the backcountry for days at a time. My brother calls us anti-establishment hippies. We're not off-grid exactly, but we keep it simple. Between us, we have one prepaid phone for emergencies and check-ins, and one MacBook I use for work. I'm a freelance writer and content creator, on retainer for a robotics company, mostly cranking out the kind of papers and web copy no one reads for fun. The point of living this way is to stay debt-free and keep bills close to zero. I only use free Wi-Fi, so once or twice a week we roll into a town with a Starbucks. That matters because we're not plugged in, no social media. We barely know what Reddit or Instagram even is, and our phone isn't a smartphone. We don't text. Last summer, we decided to backcountry hike in Arkansas, one of those states you don't hear many hikers bragging about, but we'd read about some gorgeous terrain. The rules in this park were loose, a few guidelines, no check-in. We had what we needed and planned a 6-day hike, 3 days in, 3 days out. For most of it, we saw nobody. No voices, no footsteps, nothing. Then one evening, close to dusk, we started looking for a place to camp. Our standard is about half a mile off trail, so we followed what looked like an animal path. Roughly half a mile out, we almost walked straight into a small green 2-person tent, tucked into the foliage so well it was practically camouflaged. Backcountry people can go either way, private or social. We're social. We've had great nights camped near strangers, swapping stories, sharing food, passing a joint. We were maybe 30 yards from the tent. It was zipped shut, so my boyfriend called out a friendly greeting to make sure whoever was inside knew we were there. No answer, no movement. We figured green tent guy was either gone or didn't want company, so we veered off and found our own spot. That night we didn't hear a thing. By morning, we'd basically forgotten the tent. We kept moving, and it didn't enter my mind again until late on day 5 on our way back out, when we were once again hunting for a campsite and somehow came across that same green tent. That part alone wasn't impossible, but it wasn't what we expected. Most backcountry hikers keep moving. The flap was open this time. My boyfriend called out again. Silence. He said it was strange and maybe someone was hurt and he wanted to check. I hated the idea immediately. We'd never had trouble ourselves, but we'd heard enough stories about hermits and mountain men and the kind of people who want privacy badly and carry guns. My boyfriend brushed it off. Worst case, he joked, we could offer the guy some weed. We got within about 20 yards and the stench hit us, heavy, sweet, unmistakable decomposition. My boyfriend had been calling out the whole way, but when that smell slammed into him, he stopped, turned to me and said, "What if we find a dead body?" My skin went cold. I'd never seen a corpse. I didn't want my first one to be in a tent in the Arkansas backwoods, and with every step the smell got worse, so thick it felt like it coated the inside of my mouth. I was sure we were about to find some camper dead and rotting. What we found was worse. Outside the tent were a deer's legs, 4 of them black with flies. They looked like they'd been mostly cut through and then torn off. It was brutal and messy. Inside the tent was the torso and head. A blue fleece blanket had been wrapped around the middle, soaked dark at the bottom where the legs should have been. The deer lay on its side with its rear toward the entrance. The tail had been removed. The private area was a dried, bloody mess, gaping in a way that made my stomach lurch like something had been done to it. Its mouth too, blood, damage, and the jaw bent down at a horrifying, broken angle. The tent was open enough that we could see all of it without stepping inside, not that we would have. The smell alone was almost disabling. Near the entrance was a filthy, nearly empty clear bottle of Jargon's baby oil and a stained green and white kitchen towel. I started crying instantly and begged my boyfriend to leave. He just stared like his brain couldn't catch up and managed, "What the fuck?" We ran. We half-jogged down the trail until dusk forced us to stop. We didn't even go far off trail. Neither of us slept. We didn't light a fire. When it got fully dark, we didn't use our headlamps. We sat there whispering, replaying what we'd seen, jumping at every sound. It felt like our brains were stuck on red alert. All I could think was that whoever did that to the deer would come back to his tent, see signs we'd been there, and track us to ours. I have never been that scared. Right before dawn, we tore down camp and started out. On the way out of the park, my boyfriend stopped at the ranger station and reported it. The ranger, a young guy about our age, looked as shaken hearing it as we'd been living it. He wrote most of it down while my boyfriend pointed to the approximate spot on a map. The ranger asked if we knew how the deer had been killed. We hadn't even considered it. We'd assumed it was shot, but because of the blanket we hadn't seen a wound, and we weren't about to start poking around to find one. Since then, we keep our backcountry trips to 4 days max. We're also a lot less eager to call out to other camps, and we've never approached an unattended tent again. My name is John Smith III, and I'm 55 years old. What follows is my grandmother's story. I've filled in a few gaps using documents and accounts I've read, but the spine of it is hers. My grandmother Laura survived the German occupation of Poland during World War II. Her family lived in a part of Poland that had been German territory before the war, and that context matters. It's early 1945. Laura is about 15. The Nazis have held the region for years. Her village is mostly ethnic German, so she didn't see the kind of abuse other towns did. Because she and her mother were also German, their interactions with soldiers were usually civil, until the night everything shifted. By then, the Germans were being pushed back by the Red Army moving into Poland. The villagers didn't truly know what was happening. They lived on rumors. Laura's father, my great-grandfather, Garrett, had died of natural causes some years earlier, so it was just Laura and her mother in the house. The Germans knew that, and it's part of why I believe they came to their door that night. Laura was rebellious at that age. She stayed up late, and that evening she hid in a hallway off the dining room and listened. A group of German soldiers entered, sat at the table, and her mother cooked for them and poured drinks. While her mother was in the kitchen, Laura slipped back to her bedroom, also off that hall, because she knew her mother would check on her once the food was ready. Sure enough, after cooking, her mother peeked in, then told the men she was turning in for the night. Laura waited, then crept back to the hall and listened again. "It was kind of her to feed us," one soldier said. "Excellent, really. It's nice to have a proper meal," another agreed. "I'm sick of rations. I've heard half this village praise her cooking," a third added. "So you just knocked on her door and hoped she'd offer?" someone asked. "Of course not, Lieutenant," the captain replied. "I ran into her earlier and told her we'd been ordered to search the premises, but that I doubted it would be necessary if she treated us to dinner." "That's the captain," one of them said, laughing. "Always calculating." They joked a little longer. Then one soldier asked what was happening on the Eastern Front, and the air tightened. "If you want the truth," the captain said, "the Führer made a grave mistake marching toward Russia. We're paying for it." "Why?" someone asked. "You've heard how the Russians fight," he said. "Sending men forward without rifles, shooting their own if they retreat. Stalin throws bodies at the problem. It looks sloppy, and the high command thought so too, but I knew their numbers would overwhelm us in the end." He paused, then continued, "That's why I brought you here tonight. The Soviets have broken through. They're moving straight for Germany. That means they'll come through here," someone said. "Yes, closer than we thought, 24 hours, maybe less. High Command wants to turn this village into a base. The enemy can't be allowed to reach the German border." "And the villagers?" a soldier asked. "I'm afraid they'll have to be euthanized," the captain said, a stunned silence. "But they're Germans," someone protested, "like us. We can't take prisoners now," the captain said. "And we don't have time to relocate them. An armored division arrives by 8 tomorrow morning. They expect this village empty by then. The rest of the battalion will gather everyone at midnight." The lieutenant asked why they were only hearing this now. The captain drew on his cigarette. "Because none of you have seen combat. And Lieutenant, I'll be blunt, I know who your father is. I know your rank wasn't earned, it was given. But before sunrise, all of you will understand what that uniform demands. A cold quiet settled in. The captain stood. "Lieutenant, I want you to," he didn't finish. Gunfire cracked outside, sudden and close, and the front door flew open. "Captain, the Russians are here," a man shouted. "All men to the front." Laura's mother seized her from behind. She'd been listening too. Now everything changed. Russian troops at the gates, the German plan interrupted mid-sentence. Her mother dragged her into the cellar, and they stayed there through the night, listening to gunfire and shouting until morning. I wish I could say the Russians liberated them in the way people like to imagine. They didn't. The Soviets didn't share the Germans' fragile respect for the village. They treated people brutally. Women were raped, men were shot. Villagers who had nothing to do with the Third Reich were punished simply for being German. And then this is the part that sounds impossible. Fate handed them a miracle. Before his death, Garrett had been a carpenter. In the 1930s, he spent years working in the Soviet Union and befriended a man who later became a Red Army captain. They stayed in contact even after Garrett returned to Poland. That man was Captain Alexander Sov, and he happened to be leading the battalion that rolled into the village. He'd chosen that area hoping to find my great-grandfather after all those years. When he learned Garrett was dead, he was genuinely saddened. Captain Sov told my grandmother that Garrett once built a rocking chair for his mother and refused payment. I believe that single act of kindness is what saved Laura and her mother from the soldiers under his command. They still had to watch neighbors brutalized, but they were left alone. After the war, Laura came to America in the 1950s, met her husband, the original John Smith, and lived the rest of her life in a small town in upstate New York. After hearing her story, I've always believed that Nazi captain intended to have those 4 men kill my great-grandmother and my grandmother that night, make them earn their ranks. The invasion cut it off, and a friendship my great-grandfather formed years earlier is what spared them from Soviet cruelty. Knowing that, it's hard not to feel absurdly lucky to exist. Every year I drive to the cemetery and leave flowers on my grandmother's grave. This story isn't mine, it's my step-grandmother's. She had a vivid, chaotic young adulthood in Virginia. This happened in the late 1970s, back when people used credit cards to slip locks. My grandmother lived in South Richmond, which at the time was the murder capital of the United States. She worked nights as a hotel security guard and rented a new apartment in the inner city because that's what she could afford fresh out of college. Her unit was on the 3rd floor. The building's stairwell was unlit and stayed gloomy even at noon, worse at night. Not long after she got home from a shift, she heard a shuffling sound outside her door. The stairwell was full of dead leaves, so she blamed the wind. She ate dinner and tried to settle down. The sound came back, then a thud against the door. Next she heard something, credit card knife, something flat being worked into the gap between door and frame, trying to pop the lock. She grabbed a baseball bat from under her couch, stepped to the door, and shouted that she was a security guard and armed. She expected running footsteps. Instead, a man's voice, calm and ugly, said, "You're going to open this door and I'm going to kill you." She froze. Silence followed, then a chuckle right outside her door. He didn't keep working the lock. He just started banging and scraping on the door and kept at it until about 5 in the morning. She was too terrified to leave, sure that if she stepped out and came back, she'd find him inside. Later, she went to the complex manager, who pushed her to the Richmond police. They told her there were multiple reports like hers in the area, plus sexual assaults and murders. It was around the same time the Briley brothers were active. Linwood Earl Briley was known to target women alone and with his brother. The police speculated it could have been him that night, though no one could prove it. This happened during spring break. I was 16. About 20 of us rented a cabin out in the woods in Erie County for 4 days. The cabin sat in thick forest. West of it were hunting trails and a creepy abandoned trailer by a small clearing with a single pine tree in the center. East was a huge open field that sloped down at the far end to a beach. On the last night, 8 of us went down to the beach with a guitar to sing. Around 11 p.m., 3 guys headed back up to the cabin for food. 10 minutes later, one of them called his brother, who was still with us. The brother's face changed immediately. When he hung up, he said, low and panicked, "We have to leave." Now we demanded an explanation. He said the guys had found a rabbit on the trail, head cut clean off. Not torn, not chewed, sliced like a knife did it. We assumed they were messing with us. Still, we started back up, gripping the guitar and a metal pipe we'd found, half joking but half ready. Halfway up the hill, we heard rustling and twigs snapping to the side, like someone climbing along the slope through the trees. We yelled, "Knock it off." This isn't funny. The movement stopped instantly. Nothing else happened, so we kept going. Near the top, I turned on my phone flashlight. Right in front of me was a rabbit with its head cut clean off. We ran. Something crashed out of the woods, running too, but we didn't look back. We tore into the cabin where the other guys were already inside. We locked every door and window. A couple of us, me included, stayed up watching. We finally passed out around 6:30 a.m., but barely slept an hour before someone started screaming about a decapitated rabbit head sitting on the porch by the front door. Message received. We left. This happened in 1999, miles from my hometown, up in the mountains of central Virginia. My friend, I'll call him Trey, and I took a road trip to see some caverns. It was the first time our parents let us drive that far alone. This was before Google Maps, Siri, or ChatGPT, so we had paper maps. The rule was never fold them, always roll them. We'd already missed a few rest areas marked on the map, and Trey really needed to pee. Finally, we saw a sign, Rest Area 2 MI. We pulled in around 10 p.m. A few cars were there. Everything looked normal. We used the bathrooms, then wandered to the vending machines for soda and snacks. We had about 25 minutes left to our hotel. While we stood there debating chips, we noticed the other cars and people were gone. Only a few tractor trailers sat humming way in the back, too far to hear us if we screamed. Then an older navy blue Chevy rolled in. I felt a quick flicker of relief until it ignored the open spaces and parked right beside our van, tied up against the passenger side. I tried to rationalize it, safety in numbers maybe, but even back then people didn't usually park next to vans in dark lots. This guy practically pinned our door. Trey muttered, "What are they doing?" "I don't know," I said. "They're way too close." To get in, I had to squeeze between the Chevy and our passenger door. I almost refused. Instead, I rounded the back, slid through fast, jumped into the seat, and slammed the door like someone was reaching for me. As soon as we were inside, I turned to buckle up, and a man stepped out of the Chevy into the narrow gap between vehicles. He knocked on my rolled-up window. I squealed and locked the door on instinct. He looked like the comedian Gallagher, the watermelon guy, if Gallagher wore a dirty baseball cap and smelled like a rest stop. He said, "Sorry to scare you," then rambled about being lost. I cracked the window a sliver. "We're not from here, we can't really help. Do you know how to get past Petersburg?" he asked, acting like he hadn't heard me. Trey and I glanced at each other. Petersburg was at least 80 miles away and in the opposite direction. No, sir," I said. "There's a big map inside." He ignored that too. Suddenly his hand shot up, fingers sliding into the tiny opening in the window, and he started yanking like he meant to rip the glass down. I still don't understand how it didn't give. Trey fumbled the keys to the ignition while we both yelled at him to stop. The engine finally turned over. In this low, rough voice, the man said, "I've drank blood fresher than yours anyway," and gave one last hard yank. Trey backed out while his finger was still in the window, and I frantically tried to roll it up. Part of me wishes I'd been quicker. Taking his fingers might have been worth it. He didn't follow. We hit the interstate and kept going. We never told the police or our parents. We didn't want the lectures, but I still hope I never run into that creepy vampire Gallagher again. This happened in 1996 when I was 17. My best friend Derek and I were driving from upstate New York to visit my cousins in North Carolina. It was after midnight, the road empty. To dodge tolls, I took back roads. We were wrapped up in dumb school gossip, barely paying attention, when I noticed we'd been in Virginia a while and my gas was getting low. I turned off into what looked like a tiny town. No signs named it, but later, digging around, I suspected it might have been a place called Union Level, though I'm not sure. Picture a nuclear test town in New Mexico, but dropped into Virginia backwoods. One main street, boarded houses, old storefronts with shattered windows. Derek and I went silent. The place felt charged even though we saw nobody. "This place is creepy as hell," I said. Near what looked like the end of the block, we saw an orange glow beside a brick building, like a distant campfire. I crept closer, thinking maybe people were there and could tell us where to find gas. I didn't want to get out though. We eased just past the building so we could see the light. Before I say this, I know how insane it sounds. I can only describe what it looked like. It looked like a man strapped to a crucifix, burning. He wasn't moving, which made me think it could have been a mannequin or someone already dead. The second I registered it, I whipped the car around. Even running on fumes, I floored it out of town. As we sped back through the abandoned street, something thudded into the side of my car. It didn't slow us down. We hit the main road and drove until we found a bright gas station. We pulled up, sat a moment to breathe, then got out. I walked to the spot where ID felt the impact. There was a bullet hole just above my rear driver's side tire. I'm no gun guy, but it looked like a 9. I lost it. If it had been a little lower, it would have blown the tire and we would have been stuck in that town. I ran inside and told the clerk. I asked if he knew the name of the town up the road. He just stared at me blankly. No offense, but I don't think English was his first language, so I told him to call the cops, which he seemed to understand. Thank God I drove a Toyota and the gas tank was on the passenger side. We filled up, then waited outside. A patrol car rolled in. I'm a newer viewer of your channel, but I later found your Rake vs. Dogman series, and the cop we met reminded me of that character, Officer Dixon. For anyone who doesn't get the reference, this guy was a real piece of... We told him everything. He brushed it off and even claimed there wasn't any abandoned town nearby. But I had this gut certainty he knew exactly what we were talking about. I was getting mad because he wasn't taking a bullet hole seriously. "Sounds like y'all were trespassing," he said. "And around here folks carry guns. I'm pretty sure it's illegal to shoot at someone," I said. He cut me off. "Stop talking, y'all ain't from around here. Do me a favor, get back in your car and get the hell out." Then he rested a hand on his holster. Something was wrong in that area, and I felt like if I pushed him, Derek and I would end up as names in the obituaries. "Yes, sir," I said. "Sorry to trouble you," he nodded. "No problem, young man. I'll stay behind y'all till you hit the county line, just to make sure you get out safely." I don't remember actually seeing him behind us until we reached a more populated stretch. As I said, that ghost town looked like Union level, but I can't swear it was. I do know something was happening there, and that cop was warning us not to get curious. My best guess is we stumbled into some kind of ritual and the area was protected by a cult. Maybe that's speculation. What isn't is this: I'd rather have a hole in my car than a hole in my head, and leaving was the right call. This was about 10 years ago, when I was around 20. I'd been working a few months at a small mom-and-pop health food store in Virginia. The staff was close, the owner was basically a second mother to me, and the older women who worked there felt like the aunts I never had. Since I was the youngest, I got a lot of hours and ended up closing most nights. Eventually, I was trusted to close alone. We had a regular customer who'd been coming in for years, even before I worked there, a local holistic doctor. Brilliant, about 40, divorced, well off. He spent a ton of money, sometimes loading up enough groceries to fill a car. The owner loved his business. The first time we met, he smiled and said, "Well, hello there, I'm Dr. Malloy." "I don't think we've met." He offered his hand. He was handsome, charming, funny at first. My coworker Pam stood off to the side and gave me a look that said, Be careful." She had that protective, almost clairvoyant vibe. "This is Diana," Pam said. "She just started." "Nice to meet you, Diana," he said. "Good to have some young blood around here." He lingered, talking about his work and how successful he was. Then quietly added that he'd be coming in more often to see my pretty face, making sure my coworkers didn't hear. Over the next few months, he started showing up almost every night, specifically when he knew I'd be there, right at closing. It annoyed the hell out of me, but I was too nice and we needed the money. Then came the inappropriate questions, my age, where I lived, whether I had a boyfriend. He offer himself as guidance. He mentioned he had a home office. I stayed vague. I never told him where I lived. One Thanksgiving he asked if I'd come over and cook a turkey for him. No, by then it had gotten bad enough that I told my boyfriend Jackson, now my husband. I asked him to come keep me company while I closed on Friday night because I was sure Dr. Malloy would show up. Jackson came in. A few minutes later, Dr. Malloy walked through the door and looked genuinely stunned to see him. I met Jackson's eyes and nodded. Dr. Malloy said, "Hey, buddy," in this condescending tone. His whole vibe shifted. His eyes went flat and dead, locked on me like I'd betrayed him. Jackson leaned over the counter while Dr. Malloy silently piled items into a cart. For context, Jackson is 67, scruffy, bearded, built like a mountain man, wearing cycling clothes. Dr. Malloy checked out fast. "See you soon," he said, ignoring Jackson. On his way out, he winked at me. Jackson was visibly furious and watched him walk to his car. The next day, Malloy confronted me. "Was that him, your boyfriend, real bro, huh?" Snarky, pompous. "Yes," I said, "he's actually really wonderful." After that, Jackson stayed with me until close whenever he could. Malloy began waiting for me to go on break, trying to get me to go to a nearby cafe. My coworkers got irritated. I started hiding. You know, everything you do when you're trying to avoid someone who won't take a hint. Around this time, I injured my ribs badly in a bike accident and had to stay home. I lived in a secluded old apartment above an art gallery, about a 15-minute walk from the store. That day, a friend was visiting from Germany. He brought coffee and food, and we were inside catching up when we heard a voice outside. "Hello, is anyone there?" I knew that voice immediately. What the actual? I opened the door and there stood Dr. Malloy holding a large suitcase. "I heard you were injured," he said. "I brought my acupuncture supplies. I'd like to gift you a session." He tried to step inside. I said, No thanks. "My friend is here visiting and he's taking good care of me." Malloy looked at my friend and his face filled with rage. "I came all the way here for you and this is what I get. You have 2 boyfriends now, disgusting." My friend stepped between us, told him to leave, and shut the door. Dr. Malloy banged on it, cursing and losing it for a while before finally leaving. I told my coworkers and Jackson. Jackson wanted to strangle him. Things cooled off when Malloy seemed to disappear for a bit. Then his roommate started showing up instead, scouting for him, asking if I wanted to come over for dinner, have some fun, saying Dr. Malloy really missed me. I was livid and told him to off. That roommate gave off serious sex offender vibes. Not long after, Malloy waited outside the store as I left for break. Jackson was on his way to pick me up. Malloy stepped in front of me and said, "You're going to come with me today." "No," I said, "I'm going out with my boyfriend, leave me alone." "No," he repeated, "I'm taking you to Montana. Get in my car, leave your boyfriend, I'll take care of you the rest of your life, I know you love me, don't lie." He held my wrist and started dragging me. Pam burst through the door screaming and grabbing his shoulders, yanking him back. Malloy grabbed my hair and yanked hard, like he meant to rip it out. Then Jackson came running, tackled him and locked him in a headlock. Everyone was shouting. I just stood there in shock. The police were called. Dr. Malloy was arrested and cuffed. As they took him, he looked at me and said, "Your ass is mine." A restraining order followed. I didn't press charges. We were about to move anyway, and I knew I wasn't alone at work anymore. The last I heard, Dr. Malloy shut down his practice and moved to Montana. He can stay there. I'm a 20-year-old woman now. This happened 4 years ago when I was about 16, the summer between sophomore and junior year. I've had plenty of unsettling moments in West Virginia, but this is still the one that makes my stomach tighten. It happened in Cherry River, just before it runs into Nicholas County. A friend and I drove separately and met at a pull-off along the main road to fish. Next to the pull-off was State Road Garage, fenced off and locked. At the time I didn't know what it was, but later I learned it belongs to the West Virginia Department of Transportation. Left of the building was a short trail down to the river. That evening the garage looked abandoned, no workers, no cars. The only vehicle was a beat-up pickup, maybe an old Silverado with a camper shell. I clearly remember a 3-deadbolt lock securing the shell and 2 people sitting in front. The truck was parked farther down near the trail entrance on rough ground. We parked by the main road. We didn't want to get stuck. I was instantly on edge. I'd been watching true crime and scary stories on YouTube since I was 11, and the whole scene felt like the first 5 minutes of a horror movie. The occupants looked like hard drug users, a disheveled blonde woman, worn down, maybe missing teeth, and a greasy long-haired man in a wife beater. Crackheads don't hide it well. When we passed their truck heading to the river, they stared at us locked in. My friend wasn't as bothered as I was. I'm naturally paranoid. Strange people aren't rare here. Most are harmless, but I don't relax around anyone I don't know. My friend said she could call her boyfriend 20 minutes away if something happened, though I wasn't sure what good that would do in the moment. We started fishing. My friend caught a rock bass. Not long after, we heard footsteps. The woman from the truck walked down to the riverbank. Up close she looked worse, like maybe she'd once been attractive, but drugs had hollowed her out. Her teeth were wrecked, her jaw sunken, her skin like a crumpled paper bag. She was holding a red Kodak camera. She asked, "Can you tell me your first and last names and your ages?" Then she said she was taking pictures for a newspaper. Every alarm in my head went off. We made plenty of dumb teen choices, but I'd always been cautious with strangers, especially like this. Still, I panicked and gave my first name. I lied about my age, subtracting 1 year, an idiot lie that wouldn't have mattered if someone was collecting details. I didn't give my last name. I can't remember what my friends said. Then the woman asked, "Can I take your picture?" I hated it, but I was a people pleaser and said yes. She took our photo and stumbled back toward her truck, slipping on rocks. My friend and I even stifled nervous giggles because it was such a bizarre interaction. A little later, my friend's line snapped, and we started back to our cars. Halfway up, she admitted she'd left her tackle box by the river. Every instinct in me screamed not to go back, but I didn't want her going alone, so I followed her down again. On the way, we ran into the man from the truck. He reeked like he'd bathed in a bath. He asked, "Have y'all seen my girlfriend?" The question made no sense. They'd been sitting together in the truck before she approached us. It felt staged, like something out of a trafficking story. We pointed the opposite direction from where we'd been fishing and said, "Yeah, she went that way." He nodded and wandered off. I kept urging my friend to leave. She insisted it was fine. I stayed on high alert, half expecting them to rush us with weapons. I scanned the river rocks for something I could grab and mapped out escape routes. The quiet felt wrong, like they'd either left or were waiting. About 10 minutes later, a scream ripped through the air from upriver, blood-chilling. It sounded like the woman. We ran. We bolted into the woods, away from the river, pushing through dense brush with no trail, just trees parallel to the main path. The scream seemed to come from near the trail entrance, so we couldn't risk running that way. We burst out of the tree line onto the main road downstream from our cars and sprinted to them. We threw our tangled fishing stuff inside and locked the doors. As we caught our breath, we saw the couple rushing back toward their truck. I was shocked to see the woman was alive. They glared at us, climbed in, and sped off. We sat there staring at the road, trying to process it. Minutes later, the old Silverado flew past again in the opposite direction. The woman leaned out the passenger window with the camera and snapped another picture of us. My friend pulled out behind them. I did too. We followed. My friend recorded herself saying the license plate out loud so she'd remember it. The truck turned onto back roads, and eventually we lost it. We drove to my grandmother's house nearby and told her everything. She agreed we should call the police. An officer came and took statements, but I never felt like he took us seriously. He said he'd run the plate. We never heard anything back. I still wonder who they were and what they meant to do. Somewhere there might be photos of my friend and me holding fishing poles, labeled with names and ages, pinned to a corkboard in some darkroom. About a year later, the Donald Ray Lands and Jean K. White feather case became big news around here. two people who adopted 5 black children from a Minnesota shelter and forced them into slave labor on their property. The couple we saw weren't them, but it made me think about what could have happened. That scream could have been bait, meant to pull us somewhere so they could shove us into the back of that locked camper shell. The idea that our parents might never have known what happened still bothers me. I've searched local news and articles and found nothing about them. I still fish all the time, but I've never gone back to that spot. A few years ago, during what was probably the darkest stretch of my life, I worked overnights at a Walmart supercenter in rural West Virginia. 6 nights a week, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., stalking everything from fishing lures to makeup. It was soul-crushing, a fluorescent void where your personality goes to die. Walmart already has a creepy undertow. This 24-hour store amplified it. At night, it attracted a steady stream of locals, meth heads, and opioid zombies drifting through aisles like scavengers. There were no security guards. Later, I learned most of the cameras, especially the parking lot ones, had been glitchy for months, maybe years. As one of the few young women on nights, I got plenty of unwanted attention. But one guy stood out. He appeared every time I went out for a smoke break. It didn't matter if it was 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. Within seconds, he'd round the corner and start talking like we had an appointment. It didn't matter which entrance I used. He was always there. At first, I assumed he worked there. Lots of us smoked during the 2 15-minute breaks. But he didn't work there, he just dressed like it, wearing dark blue t-shirts like the overnight crew. I stopped going out alone and stuck with male coworkers, including a guy I'd known since middle school. It didn't deter him, it became a store joke. I was uneasy, not terrified, until he escalated, constantly pressing me about whether I had a boyfriend. I was deep into GTA 5 then, so I made up a scary long-distance boyfriend named Trevor from Northern California. It fit the vibe, he didn't care. Eventually, I quit being polite and started walking away mid-sentence. One night, my usual break buddy called out sick and everyone else was tied up. I went out with 2 older women. They finished quickly and headed inside. I stayed out for one last drag. As I turned toward the door, he appeared, so fast it wouldn't be crazy to assume he'd been in a car watching the entrances. He grabbed my hand, not crushing but firm. "Come to my car real quick," he said. "I want to show you something." I'm not normally hot-tempered, but something in me snapped. I yanked my hand free and ran inside, heart pounding. I went straight to the head manager and told them everything. Turns out the stalker had a cousin on the unloading crew in the back, his excuse for hanging around. The cousin looked mortified and swore he'd handle it. Management was useless, no warning. No ban, just a shrug like it wasn't their problem. I quit soon after, less because of the stalking itself than because nobody in charge cared. A friend later told me the guy kept showing up nightly and shifted his attention to another woman. For weeks after I left, he asked people for my name and address. Then one day he just stopped appearing. Even now I think about those broken parking lot cameras and wonder, on one of those endless nights, if I'd vanished, would anyone have noticed? I'm 32 now and this happened more than a decade ago, but it still keeps me awake. Late 2011, right after high school, I was bussing tables at a small diner in Washington, D.C., trying to save money before college started in January. My friend Alex closed since middle school, and I decided to get out of the city for a weekend. Friends had rented a cabin deep in West Virginia, back in the hollers near Summersville Lake, about 3 hours from the Beltway. Bonfires, booze, fishing, easy. We took my 1990 Honda Accord. It looked like a piece of a, but it ran like a champ. I had a stack of CDs for the drive. Darkthrone was in heavy rotation. The trip started fine, Beltway crawl to 66, then west through the Shenandoah haze. But around 6 p.m., as the sun dropped, we missed a turn at a sketchy, unmarked fork and ended up on the wrong road. Yes, we took a wrong turn in West Virginia. I'm aware of the irony. The GPS was useless, dead zone, our phones weren't cooperating either. "Ah, screw it," Alex said. "Let's see what's at the end." We drove deeper. Pavement became gravel, crunching under the tires like teeth. The woods swallowed the light. No street lamps, no houses, just pines tight against the road. Then the road narrowed to a single lane hemmed by a barbed wire fence. Our headlights lit a faded sign, private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Slow down, I said. This might be it. I hope so, Alex said. Getting a double-barreled shotgun up my ass is not on the bucket list. We rounded a bend into a clearing. A weak porch light glowed on a rundown cabin that looked termite-chewed. Clotheslines stretched between crooked poles. Several carcasses hung from one line. At first I assumed it was a hunter's setup. But as we crept forward and the beams swept across the hanging bodies, my throat tightened. I'm not used to seeing skinned, gutted deer torsos, but something about the last body on the line turned my stomach. It looked different, too human-shaped, or maybe it had been human before someone hacked off the arms and split open the chest. I felt bile rise and forced myself to look away. I don't remember seeing a head. Holy A, is that a person? Alex whispered. I didn't answer. I threw the car into reverse and stomped the gas, backing away from the line. I had to do a 3-point turn. No way was I reversing down that narrow road all the way out. In the panic, I clipped a couple of drum barrels with the back of the car. What was that? Alex shouted. I don't care, I said. We're leaving. As I shifted into drive and tore back toward the dirt road, I swear I saw a figure standing near a shed about 15 yards away. It was only a flash, then we were gone. Alex started babbling nonsense, full panic, while I gripped the wheel so hard my vision tunneled. The figure didn't chase us, but I kept expecting headlights behind us or a shot that took out a tire. If we really saw a dismembered body, whoever did it wouldn't want witnesses calling the police. We made it back to the highway. The moment a bar of signal appeared on my phone, we pulled over. My hands shook as I called 911. A little later, a cruiser rolled up behind us. From the road, it probably looked like we'd been pulled over. We told them everything. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. The officers listened with blank faces, exchanged a look, and the older one said, "Sounds like y'all stumbled onto Old Man Hardrove's spread. He's a hunter. Been at it 40 years. What you saw was probably a gutted buck. No missing persons reported around here. I'd know. Holler shadows mess with you. Or maybe y'all been hitting the sauce." I insisted the body looked human. They laughed it off. "Look," he said, "y'all just got turned around. Stay on Route 19 next time." Then he gave a patronizing warning about trespassing fines and told us to be careful. We drove the rest of the way in silence. No follow-up ever came. Ironically, the weekend was great. We even told the story around the fire later as a ghost story, and everybody ate it up. And despite what people say about West Virginia, it really is a scenic sanctuary. But even now, years later, I stand by what I saw, and so does Alex. I've seen enough photos of hanging animal remains to know the difference. I'm telling you, we saw the body of someone who died horribly. I don't know who it was, but that night felt like the final frame of one of the many missing person cases scattered through rural West Virginia. There's always a reason to be afraid.